Next is kindergarten students level.
Once upon a time, there was a brother named Hansel and a sister named Gretel. They lived with their parents in a small house in the woods. One day, their parents said they had to go deep into the forest. Hansel put breadcrumbs on the ground so they could find their way back. When they got to the forest, they saw a house made of candy. A wicked witch lived there and she wanted to eat Hansel and Gretel. But the kids were clever and they tricked the witch. They pushed her into the oven and ran away. Hansel and Gretel followed the breadcrumbs back to their home. Their parents were so happy to see them. They all lived happily ever after. Next is elementary school students level. Once upon a time, there were two siblings named Hansel and Gretel. They lived with their parents in a small cottage in the forest. One day, their parents became lost in the forest and decided to leave Hansel and Gretel behind. Hansel, being clever, left a trail of breadcrumbs so they could find their way back. However, the siblings soon came across a gingerbread house owned by a wicked witch. The witch wanted to eat Hansel and Gretel, but the two were quick thinking and outsmarted her. They pushed her into the oven and escaped. Following the trail of breadcrumbs, Hansel and Gretel safely made it back to their home, where they were joyfully reunited with their parents. And so, Hansel and Gretel lived happily ever after. Next is middle school students level. Once upon a time, Hansel and Gretel were two siblings who lived with their parents in a small home in the forest. One day, their parents went on a journey and left Hansel and Gretel behind, afraid they would get lost. But Hansel was smart, and he left a trail of breadcrumbs to help him and his sister find their way back. However, they soon stumbled upon a candy house owned by a wicked witch. The witch had plans to eat Hansel and Gretel, but they were able to outsmart her and escape. After following the trail of breadcrumbs, Hansel and Gretel safely returned home to their parents. The family lived happily ever after, grateful for Hansel's quick thinking. Next is high school students level. Once upon a time, there were two siblings named Hansel and Gretel, who lived with their parents in a small cottage in the forest. One day, their parents were unable to find food, and decided to leave the children in the forest, hoping they would never return. However, Hansel was clever and left a trail of breadcrumbs to help guide himself and his sister back home. Along the way, they stumbled upon a house made of candy and sweets, owned by a wicked witch. The witch had intentions to eat the children, but Hansel and Gretel outsmarted her and managed to escape. Following the trail of breadcrumbs, the siblings made it back to their home, where they were joyfully reunited with their parents. The family lived happily ever after, grateful for Hansel's resourcefulness.